every president here.
Said that if the Nuremberg principles were applied, every post-World War II president would be indictable.
It's probably true.
Can we run down them real fast? What did Eisenhower do that you would indict him for?
Eisenhower overthrew the conservative nationalist government of Iran with a military coup. He overthrew the first and last democratic government in Guatemala by military coup and invasion, leading to years of, in Iran it led to 25 years of brutal dictatorship, finally overthrown in '79. In Guatemala it led to massive atrocities, which are still continuing. That's after almost 50 years. In Indonesia, this wasn't known until recently, but he conducted the major clandestine terror operation of the post-war period up until Cuba and Nicaragua in an effort to break up Indonesia, strip off the outer islands where most of the resources are, and undermine what was then considered as a threat of Indonesian democracy. Indonesia was too free and open. It was allowing a political party of the poor to participate. They were gaining a lot of ground, so that Eisenhower supported and helped instigate a military rebellion in the outer islands. This is just for starters. These are all indictable offenses.
What about Kennedy?
Kennedy was one of the worst. Kennedy, first of all, invaded South Vietnam. During the Eisenhower administration, they had blocked a political settlement in 1954 and instituted a kind of a Latin American style terror state.
He's like, don't get me started on that, dude.
Which had killed maybe 60 or 70,000 people by the end of the Eisenhower period, and had.
Indonesia has repeatedly been fucked over by imperialism, humanity, and Mother Nature. One thing that I found out on Twitter, it was a TikTok posted on Twitter, is that Indonesia also is ginormously long. As a matter of fact, most of the world is like at least one or maximum 2 Indonesia lengths away from Indonesia. Which is crazy because when you look at the map, when you look at like the world, right? It doesn't actually come across like that because of its positioning and the way that like the flattened out maps basically favor like countries that are away from the equator. Look at Indonesia. Indonesia is a country that is shocking that it hasn't been balkanized.
Okay, time for my favorite nightly routine of taking Indonesia out Indonesia. This is all just to show you how absolutely warped the Mercator projection is and how it favors countries further away from the equator, like, you know, the Netherlands.
Hasan, I've been learning about map projections. Dude, it's crazy,
The
dude.
US.
It's like one America.
Okay, here we are in Europe.
Dude, look at that.
It doesn't even fit in Europe. It goes all the way to Afghanistan. I mean, look how puny the Netherlands is. Indonesia, which was a colony of the Netherlands, you could fit 45 Netherlands inside of Indonesia. And now let's use Indonesia to cross over the Atlantic into the U.S. Love an Indonesia bridge. And now here
I love that she's done this so many times where she says things like, love an Indonesia bridge.
we are in the U.S. Looks like it doesn't fit. This is the crown jewel of Indonesia maps. This shows you, no matter where you are in the world, how many Indonesias you are away from Indonesia. And
There are very few places on the planet that are more than 3 Indonesias away from Indonesia. Like, look at how tiny that map is. Most places on the planet are only 1 to 2 Indonesias away from Indonesia.
clearly only a small sliver of countries and places in South America are 3 or more Indonesias away from Indonesia. You can pretty much count on being only 3
This
or
is why Barack Obama is actually not Kenyan, but an Indonesian man. I rest my case.
less Indonesias away from Indonesia. So that is a comforting thought.
That's my new theory. A lot of Americans dropped the ball when they said Barack Obama is a Kenyan Muslim. Turns out Barack Hussein Obama was an Indonesian Muslim. Specifically because he does kind of look like he could be related to the former presidents of Indonesia. I'm just saying, Indonesia, incredibly large. Indonesia, incredibly vast. Turns out Barack Obama, more likely to be Indonesian than Kenyan. What the world map should look like?
The map of the world is a lot stranger than you think it is, especially this map. You've probably seen it a lot in classrooms or office buildings, but this map is extremely, very badly wrong. As we can all hopefully agree upon, the Earth is a sphere, and that means that it is impossible to accurately depict her surface on a two-dimensional map.
Why is real life lore 7 years ago putting this from the, filming this from the bathroom, dude?
We get more and more
Okay, come on, just show me the
Madagascar
weirdness.
and New Zealand. Next door to New Zealand is Australia, and the UK looks so small just off the east coast in comparison. And Australia, in fact, is much bigger than most people believe it to be.
All right, let's get to the
Czech
juice,
Republic,
which is like Africa, okay? Because as far as I understand, this like greatly favors countries. Yep, there it is. This greatly favors countries that are away from the equator, and also specifically like North American, not North American, sorry, like Northern Hemisphere nations as well. It favors the global north.
Argentina, Scandinavia, and the UK, and still have some room left over. Russia is another place that looks pretty big at the top of the map, but dropped down next to Africa, she also seems much smaller than what our map was telling us beforehand. While we're still here in Africa, the Democratic Republic of the Congo.
The irony is that it doesn't mean that Russia is tiny. It just means it should mean how it should show you how massive Africa is, because Russia is not a small country. Like, it just shows you how massive the continent of Africa is.
Congo used to be a colony of Belgium, but Belgium in comparison looks like this. Finally, we need to look at a few other places on the map to the north and the south. Let's start with Sweden, which looks big, but comparing it to Madagascar again, we see that it actually isn't. Iceland also seems like a large island, but it's actually roughly the same size as Tasmania, just south of Australia. And finally, we have the white elephant in the room of Greenland, which towers like a behemoth at the top of the map. Greenland masquerades as being a continent in her own right, looking bigger than Australia, South America, and being comparable to North America. But in reality, Greenland is much, much smaller. The globe reveals Greenland to be the island.
What is the freaking music playing in the background? It's funnily enough, not based on EU hegemony, etc. It's literally that the Mercator projection preserves angles for navigation. It is outdated. It is never meant to show scale. It's silly that it's still used.
Island that she pretends that she isn't, and we get a much more accurate depiction this time when we compare her to Australia, South America, and North America. And of course, we can't forget about the most shy continent in the world that everybody always forgets about, Antarctica, who spends her time hiding away at the bottom of the map. Most people don't truly have a good understanding of the size of Antarctica, which could probably go either way between being larger or smaller than you think, but the truth is Antarctica is a huge continent. It is much bigger than Australia. It can stretch all the way from Kiev to Uganda, and incredibly can be placed between the southernmost tip of Texas in the United States and stretch all the way into the northernmost islands of Canada. There are many more examples like this, but you've probably understood the point by now.
Anyway, yeah. How do we get here, dude? How do we get here? Oh my God, we were talking about Noam Chomsky talking about the crimes of U.S. presidents because we were talking about Donald Trump being indicted. Oh my Lord. Welcome, folks, to the HasanAbi broadcast. I do this every day. I run the top of the hour ad break, and this is it. If you want uninterrupted, wall-to-wall coverage, non-stop, if you want literally every moment, every ADHD slammed moment of this goddamn broadcast, then you best subscribe, baby, for $5 or for free with a Twitch Prime by connecting your Amazon Prime account to your Twitch account or by getting gifted a sub. God damn, dude. My brain is so broken. Dynamic Jab 13. Thank you for the 5 tier 1 gifted subs, allowing 5 people to no longer see the ads at the top of the hour. Let's get back to the crimes of presidents. Cab Calloway. Calm like a Tom with a 10 gifted. Gage against the machine with a 5 gifted. Harkin Watch with another 5 gifted. Here it is.
Instigated a response, a reaction. Kennedy recognized that it couldn't be controlled internally, so he simply invaded. In 1962, about a third of the bombing missions were carried out by the U.S. Air Force in U.S. planes with South Vietnamese insignia, but U.S. pilot. He authorized napalm. He began the use of chemical weapons to destroy food crops. They began programs which drove millions of people into what amounted to concentration camps. Now, that's aggression. In the case of Cuba, it was just a massive campaign of international terrorism, which almost led to the destruction of the world, led to the missile crisis. And we can continue. Again, these are all indictable offenses.
About Johnson?
Well, Johnson expanded the war in Indochina to the point where it ended up probably leaving 3 or 4 million people dead.
I feel like this is Oliver Stone's like biggest L.
To block
is like, I feel like he rides for JFK a bit too much. You know what I mean? Which is like, I feel like that's a very common thing that a lot of boomers do. They fantasize about JFK because he was hot. It's like what, I would say this. I think Republicans now do the thing for JFK that Democrats now do for Ronald Reagan and even George W. Bush. JFK slander incoming? No, I think like people want to fantasize about a good president, and it's not, I don't know. I mean, it's not, it's obvious that you're fantasizing about a good president because he's hot. Because Noam Chomsky is correct. ACAP for Cutie, thank you for the 5 gifted. And Rojo Tortuga, thank you for the 10 gifted.
What looked like a potential democratic revolution there, supported the Israeli.
Having said that, yes, Untold History of the United States is Oliver Stone's best work. Yes, I agree.
Occupation in its early stages. Again, we can go around the world. Take say Carter. You know,
I'll get there, but Nixon's next.
Nixon, we don't even have to talk about. We can skip that one, okay? But
Ford, then Ford.
Well, Ford was only there for a short time, but long enough to endorse the Indonesian invasion of East Timor, which became about as close to genocide as anything in the modern period. They pretended to oppose it, but secretly supported, in fact, not so secretly. The U.S., immediately after the invasion, the U.S. did join the rest of the world in formally condemning it at the Security Council. But Ambassador Moynihan was kind enough to explain to us, in his words, that his instructions were to render the United Nations utterly ineffective in any actions.
Which is very different than how we operate with Israel, for the record. Totally different. Oh, wait, it's not. That's exactly the American, that is the American playbook, folks. We do that all the time.
Might take to counter the Indonesian invasion. And he says...
And then when I say stuff like this, people go, oh, Hasan, all you say is America bad. How dare you bring America into this? Why do you do this? Why do you do such a thing? America not bad. America small bean. And it's like so strange that it's always the same. It's always the same thing. I don't know how.
proudly that he did this with considerable success. His next sentence says, in the next few months, it seems that about 60,000 people were killed. And then he goes off to the next topic. That's the first few months, went on to probably hundreds of thousands. Formally, the U.S. Announced a boycott of weapons, but secretly it increased the supply of weapons, including counterinsurgency equipment, so that the Indonesians could consummate the invasion. That's just a short period in office, but that's indictable. Seriously, in fact, that's a major war crime.
Carter?
Carter increased, as the Indonesian atrocities were increasing. They peaked in 1978. Carter's flow of weapons to Indonesia increased when Congress imposed.
No, it's on the new liberal line is that it was the Cold War, so it was different compared to post 1991. Wait, what do you mean? So they think that that was like appropriate or inappropriate? I don't understand. Are they saying that to say that like post 1991 actions are appropriate? Or are they saying that it was inappropriate in the Cold War and they're appropriate now? Hazy, my dude. You freaking CCP dick-riding bitch. How dare you say America bad just because America is bad? Does stating the facts that America is a great Satan make you feel good? I don't care that it's true. It makes me feel bad. I somehow, however, am very different than the conservatives that I make fun of. I'm a liberal after all, which means I like to read books. I know that this guy's being, he's memeing, but there is this weird ethos in liberal circles where they're like, my dude, I am not like a reactionary conservative at all. I make fun of the Republicans while simultaneously agreeing with them when it comes to American foreign policy, because might is right after all. However, unlike the Republicans who tell you that like they want to do American imperialism for racist reasons, I'm going to also say that America needs to do imperialism for racist reasons. However, I will try to intellectualize said racism. That's right, my dude. America is supposed to be the leader of the world. It's like, yeah, a certain class of liberals buys into the JFK conspiracy as if he's going to destroy the military-industrial complex or expose the deep state or something. Dude was just a syphilic rich kid. Yeah. Did Chomsky mention the massacre of 1 million communists in Indonesia with first of all, 1 million communists in Indonesia with the U.S. giving lists of targets to the killers? Yes, he did. Of course he did, because that's a huge part of America's imperialism. But the thing about that is that they were not 1 million communists. They were women, college students, people with weird haircuts, trade unionists. And it was not actually, communists, which, by the way, even if they were, that's still completely inappropriate. It's just that they also weren't even communists. They were mostly, just like it has happened in every other fascist coup, whether that we backed, supported, facilitated, or anti-communist coups, fascist coups that occurred everywhere else. It's just whoever they consider to be communist. So, yeah. The American intelligence apparatus goes after even center-left people. They call everyone communist because it's sexy. Yeah. A lot of Indonesian Chinese basically forcefully assimilated to Indonesia. Why are they indicting Trump instead of all the war criminals they're running through, other than the fact that they're mostly dead? Well, I mean, that's one of the reasons. They are dead. The other reason is because of what I described. What I described to you was this. As long as crimes are done at the behest of American empire, that's fine. That's okay. That's permissible. Not even permissible. That's actually supported and encouraged. American presidents are supposed to do war crimes on a regular basis as long as it is to continue America's empire. American crimes, however, of presidents are totally not valid and not permissible if it's done for their own personal interests. I know Twitch laid off 35% staff. This is breaking news. I don't know anything about it, and I don't even think the Twitch staff knew anything about it. We will cover it in a second. I'm literally talking about the Jakarta method and America's war crimes in Indonesia. Can we please stay on message for a brief moment? Why are people saying F? It's making me feel like Twitch's actual servers are falling right after I said that, even though you guys are saying press F for respects for the Twitch staff that have fallen. Wah, Indonesia, wah. That's crazy. Yeah, dude. 1 million people killed. Suspected communists. Wah, wah.
Human rights restrictions. By then, there was a human rights movement in Congress to block the flow of advanced weaponry to Indonesia. Carter arranged through Mondale, vice president, to get Israel to send U.S. Skyhawks to Indonesia to enable Indonesia to complete what turned out to be near genocide, killing maybe a quarter of the population or something. In the Middle East, Carter just won the Nobel Prize. His great achievement was the Camp David agreements. The Camp David agreements are presented as a diplomatic triumph for the United States. In fact, they were a diplomatic catastrophe. At Camp David, the United States and Israel accepted, finally, Egypt's 1971 offer, which they had then, U.S. had rejected at the time, except that now it was worse from the U.S.-Israeli point of view because it included the Palestinians. In order to get Israel to accept Egypt's 1971 offer after a major war and atrocities and so on, Carter raised aid, military and other aid to Israel to more than 50% of total aid worldwide. Israel used it at once in exactly the way they said they were going to do, as every sane person knew, as an opportunity to attack their northern neighbor, first in 1978, then in 1982, and to increase integration of the occupied territories. And that's for starters. We can continue.
Reagan?
I don't think we have to talk about that one either. I mean,
pretty much all the modern powers have done genocide and whatnot, China and Russia too. That delayed reaction is copium. Because, yes, all modern powers have contributed to violence around the globe, but to compare it to the hegemonic superpower is another way of Americans that engage in some level of like liberal cope to be like, well, everybody does it, right? And it's like not to the same level or severity. Nothing comes close to it. If anything, you can talk about like local powers doing mini genocides in their own backyards, but almost always that comes from almost always comes from America allowing it to happen or sometimes directly facilitating it. Like the closest we can get to, like people always point to like the Hungarian Hungarian USSR actions, right, in Hungary. And it's like what you're describing there is marginal in comparison to what America did all around the world. Like, it's just, I don't know. It's frustrating. And then we turn around, and we turn around and you know, run the whole hypothetical argument of like, well, what if hypothetically Russia or China was a global hegemonic power? Then they would do the same thing. And it's like, yeah, but that's hypothetical. Like you're looking at the hypothetical possible violence that other world powers would genuinely engage in, right? By pointing to, the need that America has to keep doing what it's doing currently in order to stop this hypothetical genocide in the future. Okay? Very frustrating. And it's unfortunately a very commonplace. It's a very commonplace argument, specifically for Israel. Crazy Chomsky didn't mention that Carter's actions in the Middle East, i.e., funneling weapons of the Mujahideen and allowing CIA to prop up and promote Islamist fundamentalists. By the way, I think he didn't because it hadn't come out yet. I don't know when this interview was done, but I think Brzezinski openly admitted that in on a French newspaper in like 1997 or maybe later. I don't know. If this interview is in the 2000s, maybe he could have brought it up. But I'm pretty sure like Zbigniew Brzezinski, Mika Brzezinski's father, didn't reveal that bit before like it was before 2001, before 9/11 happened, but it was like close to 9/11 happening, where he was flexing about how they are the ones that brought Russia into Afghanistan with the hopes that Afghanistan would turn to Russia's Vietnam by arming the Mujahideen. Is the Great Leap Forward not as bad? Brother, that is an incredible, that is an incredible thing to compare. You understand that? Like, you're looking at no one, and I mean no one, at least as far as I know, in the history of the planet, looks to the Great Depression and points to it as though it's like a phenomena that was brought about. Like, we don't, even if on the most communist, most leftist circles, you look at like the mass amounts of wealth consolidation, it's still understood as like something that happened, like famines that occurred, as partially a natural mechanism of the economy operating. Okay? The problem is the way we look at famines under communist rule is directly a byproduct of deliberate and systematic murders rather than a negative consequence of like oftentimes well-intentioned policy failures that legitimately create massive crises, sometimes not so well-intentioned. There's a difference between the systematized machine of death and destruction and ethnic cleansing within the Holocaust, or the systematized machine of the extraction of labor through violent means in the form of chattel slavery, or what the Belgians did in the Congo, and like countries trying to move away and collectivize within their own means after being victim to colonial violence and not being able to industrialize adequately. To flatten all of that, and reduce it to this was conducted, this was done specifically for violence, for the sake of violence purposes, to look at it from a black and white framework is ridiculous. And it's a way to engage in copium, like countries doing it to themselves for one reason or another is still going to be different than America doing it to every country on the planet. It can, right? So I think some people deliberately bring me to this conversation so they can like say, oh, you're immoral or your perspective is broken. Look, it's hypocritical. It's hypocrisy. There is no such hypocrisy, and I will always duke it out on those terms if necessary. But of course, yes. I mean, these are abject failures. The USSR had its own version as well. I understand and can contextualize why it happened. I can describe why it happened. However, having said that, yes, of course, it's bad. Famine is bad across the board. It is a abject failure, right? Yes, millions of death, not good. Well, not millions, but still. The interview was from 2003, and the Brzezinski interview was from 1998. Chomsky just straight up failed to mention it. Yeah, big L for Chomsky.
Reagan is the first president to have been condemned by the International Court of Justice for what they called the unlawful use of force, meaning international terrorism in the war against Nicaragua. Again, that's just for starters. They also, the Security Council endorsed it in 2 resolutions, both of which were vetoed by the United States.
Bush won.
Well, we can begin with the invasion of Panama. The invasion of Panama, which, according to the Panamanians, killed about 3,000 people, since it's never in.
China and Russia have also done major imperialism. That was pretty much the whole point of the Cold War, and not some ideological battle. China's actions in every part of the globe was directly trying to either squash what it considered to be a rebellion or help ideologically aligned governments. It was a major misstep, Afghanistan being the gravest example of such, okay? But there's a difference between saying, you have weapons of war, we're coming, and we're going to take all of your oil, for example, and the Afghan communist government being like, please come help us purge the Muslims because they're going crazy because we keep purging the Muslims personally. Even after the USSR is like, hey, maybe you should dial it back on the religious repression a little bit. People are getting really fucking violent. And then inevitably going in to the communist Afghan government, to the communist Afghan government and you know, helping by then also, I think they were the ones who executed the leadership, right? There's a difference between that and being like, oh, we're just going to go in because we are at odds with the regional operation. We are at odds with whoever is running the country. And with the express purpose of like going in and securing material wealth. Securing the natural wealth, for example. And that is the difference between these actions. Did you mean to say China? No, I'm talking about Afghanistan. I'm talking about Russia's involvement in the USSR's involvement in Afghanistan, which was still bloody, brutal, violent, major problem. It led to the dissolution of the USSR, right? This long conflict that we're drawn into. That is the difference, though. The USSR being brought into the Afghan war was the CIA's aim. The CIA then also blew up areas in Central Asia in the USSR to scare them further. As far as Prague Spring, the Hungarian counter-revolution, and the Russian actions, the USSR actions against the Hungarian rebellion, I guess, if you want to call it that, that is, once again, maintenance of your own interior domestic affairs. It's still different. It's unacceptable, okay? I agree. But it's like you're covering matters of like domestic affairs at that point, and comparing them to you're covering matters of domestic affairs at that point and comparing them to you know, going into a country completely irrelevant to the United States of America. And all of this still stems from, this is not a real intellectual conversation to have about whether or not I consider those to be good actions or just actions or moral actions. I'm not even saying any of those things. I'm simply telling you that there are differences. right, between those things. And the only reason why we even started to have this conversation about USSR's foreign policy, which is completely irrelevant to what I'm talking about in this regard, because you wanted to deflect away and successfully got me to deflect away from America's crimes. Right? Like, Russia's violent actions does not justify America's current violent actions. USSR's violent actions does not justify America's current violent actions. If you want to talk about like irredentist actions versus imperialist actions and what like the mechanisms of extraction look like and how unequal exchange works, that's an entirely separate conversation that we can have, and I usually do have that conversation, and then people mistake that for saying, oh, Hasan finds this to be completely permissible because he hates America and he loves the USSR. He thinks everything that the USSR does is good and awesome and in support of it. He's in support of all of that, but he hates it when America does it, even though most of the people that say that are actually saying that specifically because they want to deflect away from America's actions. I'm an American, okay? I can't go back in time and stop the USSR from sending tanks into Hungary. Okay? I can't do that. I can't do that, just like I can't stop Nazi Germany from existing, right? I can't do any of those things. Ultimately, however, our opinion on historic events are completely irrelevant when we're talking about current ongoing imperialism and America's crimes, ongoing crimes, as it becomes the dominant hegemonic power. Okay? America does, however, love utilizing its former conquest against Nazi Germany as the standalone singular force of good, which allows its current and ongoing imperialism to continue. We always love pointing to Nazi Germany, okay? You know who else also did a very profoundly good thing during World War II? The USSR. Russia did that, okay? By the way, thank you, John Miller, for the 5 get the subs.
Investigated. We don't know if that's true or not. This was done in order to kidnap a disobedient thug who had been supported by the United States right through his worst atrocities. Noriega. He was brought to Florida and tried for crimes that he committed mostly on the CIA payroll.
This is the peak of, like, the USSR tried to ally with the Nazis, is the peak of the historical revisionism, because Molotov-Ribbentrop is the same principle behind appeasement, okay? Except you're dropping that as though, like, the USSR was unique in its alignment with Nazi Germany. Especially because what happened after is significantly more relevant. Appeasement wasn't good. I agree. Appeasement was shown to be wrong. However, both the Western powers and the USSR engaged in that same exact thing. Do you understand? So this reeks of the same kind of historical revisionism or the reactionary attitude that Republicans have. Okay? What does that mean? It is no different than sitting around and saying, I'll have you know, the Republican Party is the party of abolition. Can you tell me what Abraham Lincoln believed in? What party was Abraham Lincoln a part of? That's right, silly liberal. You just got wrecked. And it's like, but we're not living in that era, right? It feels so silly to bring this up. It feels so stupid to bring this up when what happened after is infinitely more important. Okay? So why would you make that point unless you have an agenda? And that agenda is to somehow make it seem like the USSR was actually pro-Nazi. even though, ironically, the Nazis hated the USSR and communists significantly more than they hated Western powers, which, especially when it comes to England, for example. This is often forgotten. It's just pure historical revisionism. You are basically repeating false history, right? And you feel as though maybe because there are other people who also agree or are motivated by the same blinding other people who are also equally blinded by ideology, that they like kind of agree with what you're saying, so it makes you feel good at the time, but it's just not historically correct. This is how reactionaries operate.
Okay, that's aggression. We could go into the details of the war in Iraq, but there were plainly opportunities for, they might not have worked, we don't know, but there were opportunities for diplomatic settlement, which the Bush administration refused to consider, and incidentally the press would not report.
It's entrenched in so many liberal minds, though. One of my friends, one of the smartest I know for many reasons, but this is his exact take on the USSR. Well, have you ever approached him about, like, what I just said? Like, if your intelligent friend, if you were to talk to your intelligent friend and talk to them specifically about, like, what you think is more important, like appeasement, which was wrong, and the USSR did it just like the Western powers did. What do you think is more important to the rest of the world history, global history as we understand it? Also, the illusion of being able to impose a new European order blinded Stalin to the danger of Germany, and his misdiagnosis, as well as his permanent distrust of Britain, led him to deny evidence presented to him by both his own and the British Secret Services. Why do you never react to Lee Kuan Yew comment? Is democracy good? Yes, democracy is good.
With a single exception, and Long Island NEWSDAY, which did report the whole story throughout accurately, and is the only newspaper in the country to have done so. The Bush administration then did attack, and the attack was carried out in a manner which is criminal under the laws of war. They attacked infrastructure. I mean, if you attack New York City, and you destroy the electrical system, the power system, the sewage systems, and so on, that amounts to biological warfare, and that's the nature of the attack. Then came a sanctions regime, which it's mostly Clinton, but began with Bush, which is, by conservative estimates, killed hundreds of thousands of people while strengthening Saddam Hussein. That takes us off to Clinton, which that's the beginning, but that's by no means the end. We can run through that one case suffices.
All right.
But there are plenty of others.
Bush too?
Let's go on with Clinton.
Okay.
And one of Clinton's minor escapades, very minor, was sending a couple of cruise missiles to the Sudan to destroy what they knew to be a pharmaceutical plant. There was no intelligence failure. According to the only estimates we have from the German ambassador and the regional director of Near East Foundation, who does field work in Sudan, both of them estimate several tens of thousands of deaths from one cruise missile attack. It's pretty serious. If somebody did that to us, we'd regard it as bad news. And again, we can continue. In the Middle East, for example, Clinton began by declaring past UN resolutions, in the words of his administration.
By the way, I mean, this is 11 minutes of facts, right? Except because you can't address these factually accurate takes, all you can rely on is being like, well, what about the USSR? What about that? Okay? So I think the most productive thing one can do is, regardless of what your position is, even if you have full knowledge over the differences in violence, okay, to rarely ever engage in this discussion, because this discussion is only brought about by those who want to deflect away from the main point of contention, America's wrongs. Okay? That's it. That is the only reason why people say, well, what about this? What about that? I'm not Russian. I'm not Chinese. I'm an American citizen. I'm talking about the United States of America and its actions that are being done supposedly with my best interest in mind. Okay? My goal and my responsibility is to try and change the minds of fellow American citizens, fellow U.S. citizens, and to change the course, to change our trajectory, to change the course of our history. Okay? There's a good take that Noam Chomsky has for this as well. It's like, he says something along the lines of like, asking you to condemn the crimes of like Russia or China is like asking you to condemn the crimes of, I don't know, like medieval Germany, okay? Like the medieval German tribes, okay? It's ridiculous. It is a thought experiment simply conducted to deflect away from the main point of contention. Like, how am I supposed to, like, what say do I have in this? I have a say in America, right? That's it. It's like asking me to condemn Attila the Hun. Exactly. Anyway.
Obsolete and anachronistic. Okay, so we're finished with that. No more international law. Then comes a period called a peace process.
By that logic, we can say nothing about Israel. My friend, if you think that the United States of America has nothing to do with Israel, please go to my YouTube channel. There's a tremendous amount of videos that you can watch on this very subject. Okay? Now, I'm not even saying that you can't talk about other countries' histories. Of course you can. Okay? But one must ask why or when these questions get brought up. They don't get brought up on their own in a vacuum. They almost always get brought up when I'm talking about America's actions in becoming the hegemonic superpower of the world, and the bloodshed that the bloody cost of said goal being achieved. You know what I mean?